Oregon Files podcast. First, our disclaimer. We're amateur podcasters simply for entertainment. If we misquote or offend, it was not on purpose to do so. Now, today's a special day as we are honored to record directly on location at BP Media Solutions here in downtown Roseburg with the one and only Brian Prawitz.
That sounded so official.
Oh, it's official, all right?
Oh, that's great.
I love it. And here's my co-host, Elliot Bowman.
Thank you, Mark. This is our 26th episode. If you are a first-timer, thanks for giving us a listen. If you've been with us since first clunky episode, we appreciate your dedication to the Oregon Files podcast. We hope that everyone enjoyed the last episode of learning about the Oregon Trail. I know we did. So today, like Mark said, incredibly humbled and excited to have a guest on that's been doing news and sports stories and, for over 25 years, along with being a city councilor and so much more to talk about. We truly like to welcome Brian Prawitz.
Two people clapping.
Yeah.
That's how it's exciting. Yes. Somewhere there's a big cheer that went up, but
I love it. All right. Well, I think we'll dive in with the very first question. Give us a little bit. Tell us about yourself, a little background. Born and raised in Oregon?
No, actually, I was born and raised in the Puget Sound. So I grew up in Puyallup, Washington, that's how you say it, which is interesting because it actually is exit 127 on I-5 in Washington, kind of like Roseburg is exit 120. One of them is 127. Or maybe it's 124. I haven't been home for so long, I can't remember. But no, I grew up in Puyallup, Washington, and then went to school in Portland at Portland Community College, Rock Creek, lived with my grandma for 2 years and was spoiled rotten. And that's where I got into radio. Then ended up at Southern Oregon State College. Just fell in love with radio. I was totally entranced with radio when I was about 12 years old, which I think we're probably going to get into. But Southern Oregon, met my wife, Janny, there. We got married in 1993. My first job was in Roseburg doing news and sports. And then we had our first girl, our baby girl, Tori, and then moved in 1995 to Missoula, Montana. Had our middle daughter, Abby, in Missoula, moved to Seattle in 1999. Had our third daughter, Reagan, moved back to Roseburg in 2002. Quit my dream job in Seattle in 2002 and came back to Roseburg. And haven't left. And been news and sports, and I spent about a year and a half at the casino in the marketing department there, and then started my own business in 2015, BP Media Solutions, and have been at it now. It'll be 7 years coming up in May, so I guess 6.5 years of being my own boss, and I've found out that I'm totally unemployable.
I love it.
Early on, what kind of made you fall in love with radio, or do you remember like kind of that moment of this is why I love radio, or this is kind of what I want to follow?
So my parents were divorced. My dad was a huge Seattle Mariners fan. And it seemed like every time I hung out with him, all we did, we were in the car a lot. He lived kind of like way out in the boonies. And so there were long road trips and stuff. And my earliest memories of my dad are listening to Mariner baseball on 710 Cairo in Seattle with Dave Niehaus. And I have a couple of moments too, like where like these Field of Dreams moments that all just like mesh all together, like great moments with my dad on the patio. He's teaching me how to barbecue chicken. And in the background on this old transistor, God, I sound old, is the Mariners ball game on the air. And it was like this mixture, this weird romantic mixture. Sun was going down, his golden hour. And I was just like, my dad, he's treating me like an adult. I'm learning how to barbecue and his baseball and let's have a catch.
But isn't that real? That's baseball though, kind of in a nutshell.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, it is.
Because baseball is really America's pastime. It's a game of dads and sons playing catch, and I think a lot of people can relate, right?
So prior to that, even I had a buddy of mine who, if we were to do it again, and today we were 12 years old, we would do what you guys are doing with the podcast. But we made up KDUM FM when we were 12, and we were huge fans of KPLZ 101.5 FM in Seattle. And we would get together over the weekends and just play music through these little intercoms in my house back and forth to each other, like half an hour at a time. We had a Q, boombox and a play boombox. And so you'd rewind the cassette tape, kids, back to... You're not supposed to laugh that hard. But we'd, cue up the tune and then we'll, introduce it in our radio voice or whatever. And we both were like, hey, let's promise to be in radio at some point. So it just kind of continued on. And then when I went to college, it was like, what do you want to do? And I didn't know. And I was like, I think I want to be a broadcaster. I'd love to be a baseball play-by-play guy. And So that's kind of the approach I took. Luckily, I had people along the way that sort of didn't say no, and I just kept showing up till they told me to go home, which eventually happened. Luckily, I was an older man who had a career at that point, but that's where it all started, and I've been very incredibly fortunate in how that's all played out.
Well, I won't tell you who I root for. We'll just leave it at that.
We can still be friends, I'm sure.
I grew up in New Jersey, so I'm a big Yankee fan.
Great.
So
I mean,
my wife's a huge Mariners fan, so we have a good household.
Okay.
Yeah, we got to go see a Mariners a few years ago when they played the Yankees. And that was my first time actually being to a Mariners game. It was awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got to see Felix Hernandez pitch.
Yeah.
It was super cool.
Yeah.
So
the king.
rooting for him. So the friend that you did the radio with or had that back, and is he still in the radio, or do you still contact with him? Or
fortunately, I do stay a little bit in touch with him. His name's Scott Jensen. And he did end up on the radio a little bit at KPLU when he was at Pacific Lutheran. He did get into the radio biz a little bit. So we feel like we checked that box.
Yeah.
Nice.
So when you got into like middle school and high school, how did you kind of continue that passion, that drive of wanting to be in the radio and the media? And because, like all teenagers, not everyone's always driven and have a passion for doing things unless,
It wasn't until I went to college at Portland Community College, PCC Rock Creek, go Panthers, that it actually became like, oh yeah, that's right. I think I want to do this thing. It was an English class, and here's how I started a pretty successful broadcast career that lasted over 25 years. I lied completely. That's how I started.
So you make it.
The deal was, yes, I also made a career out of that. The deal was write a paper on some aspect of communication. And community college, not a student, never really was a great student, although I do take pride in continuing to learn as I get old. So my entire thesis was that women and men have different types of voice inflection based on their gender, I guess. Maybe that's it. That totally awful concept. So I called Valerie Ring at Z100 in Portland, and I called this guy named Bob Thompson at KUIK in Hillsboro. And I said, and first of all, my theory was I'm going to take a paragraph and I'm going to have a bunch of people read it and record it. And then I'm going to do like some in-depth analysis in how the voice inflection is different between the people and somehow come up with some piece of research that my teacher gives me an A on. Really what it was I just want to get on the phone with somebody in radio to go meet them. And I remember being afraid to pick up, which is what we did those days, pick up the phone and call, because I knew if either one of those people were mean to me or they didn't respond, which is what I expected, it was over. Like, how would I ever get into radio? Yeah. So luckily, Bob Thompson answered the phone when I called. And I said, hey, I'm a student, Portland Community College. Here's what I'm doing. Can I come visit you and see the radio station? And, oh, absolutely. He was so nice. So, and then Valerie Ring at Z100 in Portland. That's like big time. And she's like, sure, yeah, absolutely. So I got tours of the radio stations and met all the people and got to tell them my little story. And of course, they're going to let me hang out or walk around there. Didn't cost them any money. I wasn't asking for a job. And I ended up getting an internship with KUIK in Hillsboro out there in Jackson Slough. But Bob was so nice, and I ended up getting an internship there. But I think that first visit ended with, hey, I'm calling a basketball game like Tuesday night, Jesuit in Hillsboro. If you want, you can come do stats. And I'm like, yes. So I was there, man, probably 2 hours early. And all I wanted was for him to say my name on the air, but he didn't, because I wasn't anybody. I was just some dude. And but here's what I learned. Every time he just said, hey, okay, Thursday I'm doing a game. If you want, show up, and pretty soon he bought me a hot dog. And so I got paid. Yeah. And then one time he mentioned my name on the air, and it was like, oh, check the box. And then pretty soon what I learned from that was be on time, have a great attitude, and wear a clean shirt. And you beat like 80% of the competition. And so that's what I just did. And I figured I'll just keep showing up until they tell me I'm terrible and go home. And I got this internship, and it was early in the morning, and I was rewriting stories out of the Oregonian, and I was good at it. And then I remember the first time they read a story I wrote on the air, Lisa Dupree, thank you so much. And then they said, hey, why don't you voice the thing you wrote? Oh, I'm getting chills, guys. So, and it was so early in the morning. I was driving to school or back home or whatever, and I heard the lead line of the piece that I knew I had voiced, and I pulled over, and I listened to my voice on the radio for the first time on this podunk little stick out in the middle of Nowheresville. But it was my voice, and if I heard it today, I'd probably cringe because I'm sure I was doing some awful inflection things or something. But have you seen that thing you do? The movie?
Yeah.
You know the scene when the song's on the radio for the first time, they lose their minds?
Yeah.
That was me, guys.
Yeah.
I love it.
That was me.
Well, because it meant something. It was real.
Oh, man.
Right. There it is.
And then from there, it just kind of like, I kept in it, went to Southern Oregon, had a little bit of experience in a news station. Annie Hoy and the team down at JPR at Jefferson Public Radio at Southern Oregon taught me a bunch of stuff about news. And then I just kind of kept getting the next thing going, and I don't even know how to explain it. Eventually, I got hired in Roseburg, 1993, Dan Hearn, and away we went.
Yeah. So if it wasn't for Bob and Valerie not answering their phone and giving a college student a shot, just a tour, then that wouldn't.
That's cool.
Would you still have tried another avenue or another route, or would that just been kind of like, well, maybe it's just a sign it wouldn't have been for me? Or
I really don't know. I've never thought about it. I think it's really possible that I'd be another one of those people that wishes they would have gotten that break or tried, probably. Like, there's probably people out there that wish they would have done something like that, but didn't have the courage to or whatever. I mean, I think the hardest part of that whole thing was picking up the phone the first time and dialing it, knowing if I don't get an answer, like, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
And maybe that's why one of the things you and I were just talking about a second ago before we started recording was people being available and open and helpful when there's really no expectation of that, or you have great excuses not to be, and then you still are. I don't know. Maybe that's what makes a nice person or something. I don't know.
So from radio, from a long career, there's a lot of stories and people. Can you just share a little bit of some of the amazing people you've met and covered, and a high level overview? Because I know there's a lot.
Well,
yeah.
I was a kid growing up in Puyallup, Washington, listening to 710 KIRO. I remember the day Ken Griffey Jr. made the Mariners. I remember the coolest thing I'd ever done in my entire life up to that point was that my uncle was a Seahawks season ticket holder, and we got to go to the Steve Largent retirement party for season ticket holders. And it was in like the convention center. And I remember eating a copious amount of Oreo cookies that were out on a table. I remember lots of people milling around. And then I remember, like royalty, all of a sudden somebody points up at a tiny window over there in the room, and there's Jim Zorn and Steve Largent, and they waved. And I was like, my life is complete. And actually, here's one for you. So on that day, I couldn't have been older than 10. Tony Ventrella was there. Tony Ventrella was the sports guy on King 5. I remember going up to him and I said, "Hi, my name's Brian, and I'm coming after your job."
Really? And you said that seriously?
And he said, yeah. And he goes, "You'll get out of it whatever you put into it."
There you go.
Okay.
Ooh.
Fast
Well, that's good
forward
advice, though.
20 years.
Yeah.
I was 29 when I got the gig at 710 KIRO in Seattle, 1999. Could not believe it happened. It was the greatest career achievement. It just checked every box. I could die a happy man.
Yeah.
And sure enough, I'm the afternoon sports anchor on 710 KIRO, and I was at the Kingdome for 5 minutes before they blew it up, and Safeco Field was there, but I did actually get to work in the Kingdome for just a little while. And guess who I got to run into and rub elbows with? Tony Ventrella was still on TV then. And we got to talking one day, and I couldn't wait to tell him.
Yeah.
I said, "Hey, Tony, do you remember Steve Largent's retirement party?" "Oh, yeah. I said, "As a kid, man, I went up to you and I told you I was going to come take your job." He goes, "No kidding." I said, "Yeah, you gave me the best advice. You said, I'll get out of it what I put into it. And here I am." And we were buddies the whole rest of the time.
I love it.
He loved it. He was so proud that happened. I said, I missed it a little. I'm on radio, your TV, but maybe I'll be on the TV someday. Anyway, how about that for like full circle, like totally, and and there are a bunch of other people too. I mean, I got to meet Bob Costas was another guy that just blew my mind, and Vince Scully and all the guys that you've seen. John Miller is the voice of the Giants, and Mike Tirico, ESPN. I met all those guys, and they're all shorter than you think. How cool is that?
That's wild.
So yeah.
Vince Scully, I was born and raised in Los Angeles. So Vince Scully, the voice of the Dodgers, that voice, that, you're talking about bonding with your dad. That was me and my dad driving back from, you always had to leave Dodger Stadium early because of the traffic. And we'd always listen to Vince Scully on the way home. And so it's so wild. Yeah. Dodgers all the way.
Yeah. And Vince Scully showed up, thank God, for interleague play, but Dodgers came and played the Mariners, and I was the anchor, afternoon guy. And I knew that day I was going to work my tail off to get Vince Scully on one of my casts. And sure enough, I'd get to the station about 1:00. My first cast was always about 3:15. Sports 15 and 45 past the hour, So I'm at Safeco. I get there a little early. I go straight to the visiting broadcast booth. When is Mr. Scully going to get here? They said, it'll be about 3:45, whatever time. I said, okay, I'm not just anybody. I'm not just a fan. I'm actually the guy over here on Cairo. The booth is here, and I'm going to be up. If I could please, what do I have to?
Yeah.
They're like, he'll be cool. It's cool. Yeah. Come back at 4. Sure enough, come back at 4. There he is. Mr. Scully, hi. My name's Brian. Could we please? And oh, absolutely. And in that whole gentlemanly, fatherly thing that happens, he was just so, so nice. He was honored that I asked him to do the broadcast, Yeah, sure. What time, And I said, well, 5:15, 5:45, whatever time it was. I can't remember. And I remember going on, he came over to the Mariners booth, and I was sitting in the back and put the headphones on, and I'm talking to the engineer. Greg Herschel actually was on the air at that time with me, and Greg and Val. He goes, right before we go on, he goes, hey, Brian, you normally it's 3 minutes, He goes, hey, listen, we've cleared all the spots. We're not going to do the traffic break. You could take as long as you need to with Vince Scully. Aww. Please do not worry about what time it is. Sweet. So did the whole interview with him. I don't remember one thing I said. Somehow it didn't get recorded. It's just gone.
Oh, I was going to ask you if it was still recorded somewhere.
But here's what I do have. I had him sign a baseball for me, and I had him sign my business card.
You still have those?
Oh, absolutely, dude. Bury me with them. Even if I'm ashes, burn the ball with me and spread that with me too. Absolutely.
That's awesome.
And so I just remember him being incredibly gracious, like everybody says. And then when he passed, it was sad. And the stories that people were telling were 10 times better than this one I just told, because of how much he meant to people and the way he did research, the incredible stuff he came up with. The moments in history that he saw. I mean, Kirk Gibson, obviously, but he called Hank Aaron's 715th home run.
Right. Yeah.
Hello, and he called it to perfection, the way that Vince Scully would have called it. If you haven't listened to it, you need to.
I got chills now. Now you gave me the chills.
Oh, you got to go back and just listen to that call, because it's just everything. And there's even like this like social, moment. Like you're thinking, he mentions that X number of thousands of people are standing and cheering a black man in Georgia in 1970, whatever year that was. And so he just hit like, all these things that are just so perfect. So.
Didn't he called Ebbets Field games too?
Yeah,
Wasn't he in the Brooklyn 1940? Because they moved in
with
52,
the team.
I believe.
Yeah, I think
Ebbets Field was not. I think the last year was 48, right?
I thought both the teams moved in about 57 or something, but that seems late now that I say that.
Man, that's amazing. You got to think.
We're all busted for not knowing that.
No. And they always said when Ebbets Field got demolished or moved to Los Angeles, it was like a relative,
Oh, I believe it.
Passing away. And
I totally believe it.
Yeah.
And I love every time I see the Mets uniforms. I love it because those are the colors of the teams that left, and some people don't know that. The other great thing about Ebbets Field and the Brooklyn Dodgers and Vince Scully and such is Bob Costas always saying that is you could walk down the street in Brooklyn and never miss a pitch because all the radios were all tuned to the games. And you could hear either Vince Scully or, whoever was on the air with those games. You could just hear it because it was just so ingrained.
That's amazing to think about. Man, he saw Jackie Robinson. He saw Mel Ott. I mean, he got to see all those great.
And then if you think about how the old timers that were like maybe last vestiges of how old when he started,
Right.
which had to have been in the 40s. Then the old guy, I mean, when did Ty Cobb die? Was he 1 degree from Ty Cobb?
Yeah,
If I met Vin Scully, am I 2 degrees from Ty freaking Cobb?
Yeah.
I could be.
Yeah.
And now you're 3 degrees.
Right, yeah.
Congratulations.
Man.
Could be.
Yeah, man, I can go on and on.
Right,
You
yeah.
got to see all all the great
podcast.
Yankees you got to see and everything.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So is there anyone that you personally wanted to interview or even to this day would love to interview you haven't gotten a chance or talk to or that phone and talk to?
In sports or just in general?
In general.
I mean, I think what happens as you get to be closer to 50 is you have more of an appreciation for the Beatles. I think it just automatically happens. Some people are already, astute at a young age and really appreciate the Beatles when they're in their 20s. But it's taken a while for me, but I'm a huge Beatles fan. I would just love to sit down and chat with a guy like Paul McCartney, or because you could theoretically still talk to Paul McCartney and have an interview with him, but this is going to sound really lame, but I really actually kind of got to talk to all the people I really, really wanted to talk to. I'd have to go back a ways and think about who else would I want to talk to.
Sure.
But like from a historic standpoint, I was around like the golden age of baseball or sports in Seattle from 99 to 02, if you think about it, from the Kingdome to Safeco and what was CenturyLink. I don't remember what it was the first year it came out, but the Seahawks new stadium. And that was Ichiro, Alex, Junior had left, Alex had left, which is why the Mariners were able to get guys like Ichiro and Mike Cameron and some of those dudes. And then for the Seahawks, that was Mike Holmgren and Sean Alexander and Matt Hasselbeck, and they'd started to build what became the Super Bowl 40 team that got robbed. I'm not over that. And then the Sonics were still there. That was Rick Neuheisel's time in Washington. There was a Rose Bowl win in there. I got the cover.
Oh, wow.
The Sonics were still Gary Payton and Vin Baker and
Kevin Durant.
Kevin Durant, no. I was gone by that time. Although I do remember being in Pioneer Plaza, Portland, when the Blazers got the top pick and people were actually they had Greg Oden's name, but they highlighted the last G in his first name and the OD and his last. So they were like, Greg Oden is God and we're going to bring this guy here. I remember that. I do remember that, and it hurts a little.
Yeah.
Maybe he's the guy I'd want to interview. I don't know. It's been pretty cool.
Well, it's probably a good segue for the next question. Dinner party, 3 guests, dead or alive. Who would you have over?
All right. I had to write. This is the toughest question you're asking me.
It's a good question.
So I'm gonna go with my 5-time great grandfather William, who was actually that would be William's dad. So back in 1859, my 4 times great grandfather immigrated from this little town in Poland, which at the time was Prussia because the German border wasn't put there till 1861. So 1859, September, I have the manifest. He was transported across with his aunt, uncle, and 2 cousins from their little town in Prussia. Apparently his mom had died, but his dad was still alive. So to get out of whatever was happening, and it must have been very tumultuous because Germany hadn't been formed yet. There must have been the downfall of Prussia must have cast a very dark cloud over my namesake family back in Santa Rudnica, Poland. He basically, it would be like me putting my 5-year-old or 3-year-old in the hands of my brother and his wife and their kids to leave this country to go to that country because my wife had died and I was raising this child by myself. And that's the guy I want to talk to, the dad of William Prawitz, who got shipped across to get away from whatever was about to happen. And then the German border, 1861. So that guy, when I found the manifest on that, it solved a huge family mystery, which was when did our family move and where were they? And we had the story wrong, and that proved that it was actually not his dad, it was his aunt and uncle and nephews or cousins that he came over to the United States in. Before, by the way, Ellis Island, there was a thing called the Grand Union Station in New York. And that's still there. So I could theoretically walk through the same portico as they did.
Wow.
So that would be one person. Paul from the Bible, who started out as Saul, who was persecuting all the Christians and then had this big thing and ended up becoming an incredible figure in Christianity, and that'd be kind of amazing. And then I already mentioned Paul McCartney, Billy Joel. I'm a huge Billy Joel fan. I think I'd invite Billy Joel. Maybe we could convert Billy Joel with Paul at the table. I don't know. But Billy Joel's been a major influence. He's been the guy that's like, the songs, as I've gotten through my life, all those tunes make more sense, and I've like learned things about how to process the world around me through all of his music. So I guess that would be my trifecta.
That's funny. I feel like I love those answers.
Yeah.
What you say about Billy Joel, I almost feel like Bob Dylan has a lot of that for me, even though, of course, he's he's before my time, but there's a lot of songs that Bob Dylan has that translates to my youth and things like that. So I totally understand.
And you appreciate him more as you get older, I think, too.
Right.
Yeah.
And he's easy to sing along to, too. He's got that. He's got that great. You can't mess up a Bob Dylan tune. He's got that great. I don't play the harmonica as well as Bob, but his voice is pretty easy to mimic. So, so we talked about sports, but we haven't really dove into the news cycle that you've covered. Yeah. And I know it dates back, 25 years, right? Not to date you back 25 years when the news.
It's 30 now, I suppose.
Right. So there's a lot of stories that have stuck with you, I'm sure, over the years.
Yeah. Yeah. There was a trio of stories that happened when we were in Missoula, Montana that really stand out. I remember that my first stint in Roseburg, 93 to 95, I remember when the Chamber would announce the people talking on Monday. It was thrilling for me because I had something to write and report on. Yeah. Like that was the level of excitement for news. And it was tough. And so I don't really remember much from 93 to 95. There was a really interesting murder trial, though. There was a sheriff's deputy named Larry Gibson. This is one for your Oregon Files.
I was going to say, yeah.
Larry Gibson, right
93, 94. He was a sheriff's deputy, and his son disappeared. Little boy disappeared.
Okay.
And they couldn't find his body. And it was right after, this is what was so weird. It was right after the whole O.J. Simpson, Nicole Kidman murder trial and all the things that happened right around. But that was like 91. I feel like 93. This was 93-ish. Anyway, Larry Gibson was put on trial. They could not find the boy's body. Yeah. And so it was this really interesting effort to try to put everything together. And like there was one piece of information that had changed in the trial. And that's what brought it back up again. And they never formally charged him with anything until this time. And he was acquitted. He was actually, I think he was given it was a manslaughter charge. And I think he went to jail for 2 years. And his family was terrified and they left. And because they were very afraid. Anyway, there was a really interesting trial in Roseburg between 93 and 95 that sticks with me today. But covering news in Roseburg when I was first starting out in 93, that was tough. Moved to Missoula in 1995. So I told you earlier, I remember things 80% correctly. So there may be some dates here that are not quite exactly perfect, but I remember happening in a row. There was a young man at the University of Montana, a track star, who fell into the ice-choked river right by the university, and they couldn't find his body. And I remember standing around this slough that was layered with ice. If you think of like, baklava, puff pastry layers of ice, because as it freezed and thawed, you get these different layers. And they were actually using a backhoe, and the fire department was there spraying water into this hole, this slough about the size of maybe, I don't know, think of Elk Island and, some of the water around there, take a big space of that. They're trying to find this dude's body in these layers of ice with this huge backhoe. And a whole bunch of people were lying. It was freezing cold. A bunch of people were lining the edge watching, and every time that stinking backhoe dug into the ice, it was like, are we going to get half a worm and an apple here?
Yeah, no kidding. Right?
What's going to happen, right? So they clear this whole thing out, can't find him. And the only way his body would have come out would have been through this little grate down here at the bottom. Somehow they just never ever found his body. So that took up a bunch of time. Like a week of watching this every single day, standing outside as the news guy, waiting for this moment. And eventually they never found his body and life goes on, right? Well, maybe a week after that happened, in Frenchtown, Montana, downstream from Missoula, we got this call one day of possibly a body in the river. And they started to investigate that, and it was curious, and the cops were I was a scanner hound at that day, back then, and they were interested. And then one morning, super duper early, there was a train derailment in Frenchtown. And this train was carrying chlorine. Like, I don't even know what the chemical would be, but it had chlorine on the train, and the train crashes, and the chlorine breaches one of the tanks. So this chlorine cloud starts floating out all over the place, and it's raining. So chlorine and water makes like acidic whatever,
right?
Chloro whatever acid, right? So this breaks out at almost the same time. The entire town of Frenchtown is evacuated to the high school. I stood with one of those old brick cell phones for like 2 days straight, talking to every news agency and that knew my number all over the place, updating what was happening. And because of that happening, they couldn't go search the river to see if they could find this dude's body. So he probably floated all the way to Lake Pend Oreille. I don't really know what happened. But that happened. And then
crazy story.
Yeah, I love it.
Then the next day, I don't even know if I was done at Frenchtown because I had to get new brick batteries, the thick ones for this stupid phone, from my boss, because he said they found the Unabomber in Lincoln, Montana. Go home and change clothes. I've got your cell phone. You're headed to Lincoln, Montana, which is an hour from Missoula. How long is your podcast? Because this is probably going to be the longest episode you've ever done.
I can't wait.
I take the KGVO Super News Cruiser, which is garishly decorated with all of our logos and everything, and actually had orange siren lights on top of it. It was when the Outbacks came out, and they were brand new, and I had one. So I go to Lincoln, Montana. I've never been to Lincoln, Montana. Think of Idlewild.
Yeah.
Okay. It's just the freeway. There's just a highway in the middle of nowhere, and there's a bar over here, and there's a couple hotels here, and that's it. There's like a dirt road, and there was this old gas station right here on the corner, and then so I hit town, and I don't even know where do you go to find where this is all happening. So I ended up going to the little bar cafe. I think I saw a CBS radio news car. Oh. So I go in, and I find the guy who's sitting in there, and I said, "Hey, he stood out. I was like, "Is this you?" Yeah. I said, "Hey, I'm here because I'm trying to find the Unabomber situation, and nobody's talking to me." He's like, "Yeah, they kind of shut the doors of the town as soon as that all hit." And I thought I was kind of early to the game, but he goes, "Yeah, follow me. I'll take you to where everything's happening. Follow me." So we drive 5 miles off of the freeway, highway, on this dirt road that was just this winding dirt road. And we come around a corner, and both sides of the road are lined with SAT trucks and vehicles. Like the media had already been there and camped at the place where the FBI had basically just said no further than here.
Yeah.
Because the cabin was actually off the road over a hill behind over there somewhere. Who knows? I don't know, because I never got to go. So, okay, now what?
Right.
Yeah.
Squeeze my way in there.
I'm on scene. Now what do I do? First of all, I know nothing about the Unabomber, and I can't look him up on my phone.
Right.
Next, there's no cell service in Lincoln, Montana, 1994. So the only way to communicate is on a payphone at the old gas station at the corner, back 5 miles that way on this dirt road, which I did get stopped once by cops who told me I was driving too fast. So we all lined up like you see in the old days when the dads are trying to call home to tell the family that the baby's been born in 1960 at the hospital. Wild. So we're like 3 or 4 of us. And if somebody got on that stupid payphone, you wouldn't get off of it because it's the only line of communication. So I mentioned OJ a minute ago. So Remember the white Bronco, right?
Uh-huh.
And although that was his white Bronco, I just realized. But
Without
anyway, the
Collins,
federales kind of used the white Broncos to like transport people. Maybe they were OJ's fleet, and they just confiscated them at this point. So I'm on the phone, and I'm talking on the radio, and I'm reporting from Lincoln, Montana. Brian Prawitz, CBS News, whatever they told me to say at the end. And I was on hold waiting for somebody, and here's what I see. I see 2 white vehicles hang a hard right and go that way toward Helena, and 3 civilian cars right behind them take off going that way fast. And I was like, something tells me that's important, but I'm standing here on hold, probably waiting to talk to somebody in Billings or, who knows, Butte, on hold. And I just remember watching those guys drive off. When you think of the Unabomber, what image comes to mind?
The hairy guy, the
orange jumpsuit, handcuffs, all must, right?
Yeah.
That picture was taken by students at the Montana Kaiman, which is the name of the University of Montana newspaper, who chased the federales I watched them leave.
What?
They chased them all the way. The story is those guys were going really fast through very curvy mountainous roads to get to Helena. And the students were the ones that got the first pictures of the Unabomber because they stayed on those dudes' tail, and they got ahead of them and they got into position, and the world fought for those photos to be the first ones to have them on the front page of the deal. And
World fought and tried to pay for it.
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I'm still probably sitting on that phone, the hack reporter saying, I'm here, but so
that
unforgettable period of time.
That is a story, man. I love it.
That is wild.
Yeah. So I was there. I don't think I did a very good job, but I covered it.
Man.
Wild.
So is there any, well, I mean, this kind of almost leads into it, but is there any stories you wish you would have covered that you didn't get a chance to?
Oh boy. Honestly, I did news so I could do sports.
Yeah, you didn't know you were getting into.
I wish that I got to cover the opening of Safeco. I got to cover that first All-Star game that they had there in 01. Mm-hmm. I got to stand next to Cal Ripken Jr. and Tony Gwynn, and after the game, they were signing the bases had their logos, their numbers on all 4 sides. So 8 over here and 29 over here, if that was his number. And they were signing the bases. So here's Cal Ripken Jr. and Tony Gwynn signing the bases from the All-Star team. Could you imagine getting your hands on one of those? So pretty great. Covering those big things is actually so much work. Like the All-Star game, my wife was having our 3rd daughter at that time. So she was born July 9th, and the All-Star game was like July 11th. And that whole week of all the stuff, like all the Hall of Famers come to town and there's interviews, and it's like a madhouse. I missed all that because my wife was in labor and having our 3rd child. And so I missed all that and got to go to the All-Star game. So I kind of got the ice cream out of the deal. I didn't have to eat any vegetables. Those huge events are fun to say you covered them, but they are a ton of work. There's so much stress. There's so much that happens. I haven't really thought about, like, I wish I could have covered a Super Bowl, or I wish I could have covered a thing. Right. And like Jim Maine shooting the bad guy on I-5, the kidnapping. There was a famous, Jim Maine was the sheriff here. And
here you go, Mark.
Yeah. So there was a kidnapping, and the bad guy came down I-5, and everybody knew that they were coming this way. And then the car wrecked. I want to say it was up maybe just south of Yoncalla. And Jim Maine, as the sheriff, rode in, and he actually took a sniper shot from across, I don't know how far it was, when the bad guy showed his face with the kid.
Yeah.
And shot the dude with a sniper shot, and the little girl got away and ran away. And so there's a picture at the sheriff's office of the car wrecked in the median and the little girl running away from the vehicle just seconds after that dude's head exploded.
Wild.
Picked him off.
Good. That's crazy.
Jim Maine, yeah.
That's crazy. So when UCC happened, were you working the radio, or
goodness.
What was that kind of coverage like? I know that's
I started. So I left. BP Media started in May of 2015, and my sister's 40th birthday was October 2nd, 2015. My birthday is October 4th. And so that weekend, I was going to take my youngest daughter, Reagan, up to Puyallup to go surprise my sister on her birthday on the 2nd. And UCC happened. And I was actually sitting with some clients, and somebody got this weird phone call, hey, something's going on at the college. And I started flipping around trying to find any information about it and couldn't find it. And it was like some kind of weird radar was going off in everybody's head, because we were trying to, we didn't know anything. Mm-hmm. We were trying to confirm that it was legit. Was this just a hoax? And then somebody's like, hey, people have been shot at Umpqua Community College. I've never told this story. I'm getting all chilled and worked up. And at the time, I was working really closely with United Way, and Brian Trankel and I are really close friends. And it was one of those where you stand up and you don't know what to do. Everything has changed, and there's something, and I have this Superman gene that says, go fix everything. And it's not like I was going to go to the college, but I also was just like, okay, who needs me? What do I do? Yeah. And then a little bit of information started coming in, and I was like maybe a couple hours from grabbing my daughter and driving up, but all of a sudden, of course, everything stopped. And I don't remember what happened between that time. That must have been 10:45, 11 a.m. And I don't know what happened between then and about 1 o'clock, but I ended up at the fairgrounds. I heard that people were being transported there.
Yeah.
And I went to the fairgrounds, and I ran into a couple of guys that I'm really good friends with now that were pastors and still are. And we just started praying. We didn't know what to do. We were just stuck. What do we do? And so me and these two dudes that kind of knew each other a little bit, we were just arms and shoulders, and just words were coming out. And then the buses started pulling up, and people started showing up with signs with names on it, because nobody knew. Yeah. They knew something horrible had happened, but they didn't know if their family member was going to come off a bus. And I remember there was a TV camera, and very chaotic and very frightening. And my original motivation was somebody might need a ride home, and maybe I could help someone. Mm-hmm. But also I was minutes, I was supposed to pick up my daughter from school and then drive up. And this is therapy now, guys. Thank you.
This is amazing.
So I watched guys like Jerry Smart, trying to think of other people that were there at the time. Maybe Will Irwin was there. But they were going up to people coming off the bus. And people were coming off the buses basically falling into whoever was there. Not a lot of people, but there were, traumatized eyewitness victims. And now as we rewind and we know, they were queued up around Snyder Hall to get on buses. I think a lot of people saw the room as they left campus. So these people were just absolutely beside themselves and in shock, I think. And so they had this, I think the Floral building was sort of like a trauma triage situation. And so they were taking really upset people off the bus and walking them over there to try to get them calmed down. And I was shook, but I didn't have a role, and I didn't know what to do, and nobody really needed a ride at that point. It was just my intentions were pure, but it wasn't helpful. And I went and picked up my daughter and started driving to Puyallup, Washington. And the thing that stopped me in my tracks was the top of the hour news, as a news guy my whole life. And I remember listening to whatever stations were available. I remember pulling over at the Deaver Connor sign, northbound I-5, at the top of the hour news, with my kid sitting next to me, and just breaking down, bawling, because Roseburg, Oregon was the top story on CBS News. And I was like, no, this is bad. Bad. The next day, we tried, I don't even know how that hurt my kid. Reagan's watching me cry like this. And I remember pulling over the Panera Bread in Kaiser, and sitting there trying to process what was happening, and normal life is continuing, and nobody around here cared that where I was. And it was so surreal. Anyway, the next day, some people were like, hey, we need to work on like a fundraiser. And that's where the UCC Strong thing came from. Okay. So we literally ripped off the UCC logo and then finished it out with Strong, and then made arrangements to start printing T-shirts right away. Okay. And then right about then, Brian Trankel was involved, and they created the fund. And then when I got home, I made it back from Puyallup to Roseburg in like 4.5 hours, which has to be a land speed record. I remember getting in line with a bunch of other cars doing 85 at about Lacey and just staying right with them.
Nice.
Nobody, we didn't pull over to pee because you didn't have time to actually need to go to the bathroom from when we started. It was so short. Anyway, got back, immediately dove in with Brian Trankel. Immediately started, and he was in touch with Kelly Wright, who was the victim's advocate. And so I feel like there were 3 places that the UCC thing was happening. One was the courthouse, one was, UCC, one was City Hall / courthouse, and then the other was at United Way. And we worked for days and days. There were some people that came from West Virginia who were there for the Virginia Tech shooting that were incredible to try to help the United Way form this thing, this UCC Strong Fund without getting sued. And I looked up and it was October 21st. Like, it was such a blur.
Wild.
And I think everybody has a close connection to what happened, no matter what. I had daughters that were all the age of the victims and the people that were in the room and around. So my kids knew 2 or 3 of the victims. And then both my middle and youngest daughters were at UCC the day before registering for a class. So they were in the main, area there. So, I mean, how close everybody probably who lived here at the time has some close thing to it. But yeah. And then I helped with the UCC Strong Fund and assembling that and watching people work together to try to distribute the money that had come in. And I remember when the President Obama came and the chaos that came around that and the sideshow and the circus that happened. And that was, here's what I also remember though. That Monday had to have been either the 4th or 5th. We lined that whole road with people welcoming the kids back. And Pacific Power had a huge flag at the turnoff to UCC, and the whole road, what is that, 2 miles, was lined with people with signs. And it made me proud to be from Douglas County. Yeah. It was incredible. And I think it was all way too soon for everybody at the time. And I don't know how many students actually came back that day. But there was a lot of traffic on the road that day, and it was incredible to be a part of. Somewhere I have a video on my phone of what it looked like, but yeah, that was life-changing for sure. And, recently CNN came to town. Some reporter came to town and wanted to talk about the 7-year anniversary and how we've healed as a community and what does that look like and all that. And I refused to be part of the conversation, and a lot of people that I know, they checked in with family members and stuff, and the families, they don't want to talk about it. They have their own thing. It's so sensitive and so difficult for everybody. There are some people that want us to remember it every year. There are some people that don't want to ever talk about it again. There are families that will never be the same. There are families who have people that were just on campus that will never be the same, let alone been anywhere near the room or heard the shots or I think probably everybody did. But turns out it can happen here. And I really wish it hadn't, obviously, but yeah. So
then you went on to become
city council.
Yeah. Was that before or after?
After.
So did that inspire
2017.
you? Okay. So did that motivate you to say, okay, I need to, did that lead to that?
No, not really. What led to that was that I wasn't, I had been on the radio all those years, and then I left radio to go to Seven Feathers, and I was working in Candyville for a year and a half and really didn't feel connected to Roseburg.
Okay.
Then I started my own company, and then I was in downtown, and I got around a guy named Trevor Mock,
Yep,
who has a
yeah.
company called
Carrot.
Carrot. And when I got around him and Seth Bueckley, those guys really fired me up to give this self-employment entrepreneur thing a try. And then once I made that move, I felt like Roseburg had been so good to me for so long that I should give back somehow.
Nice.
And then somebody said being city councilor would make you more, like, give you credibility, and it would be a good thing. And Victoria Hawks was stepping down, and so it was like an open seat, so I wouldn't have to like de-elect someone. Ended up in a huge race with Juliet Palencius. I think it's the last most interesting city council race that we've had in this town.
Yep.
And she and I are friends now. She's a rock star. But yeah, that was the motivation to become a city councilor.
So what was your time like as, on the city council?
I'm still there.
That's what I thought.
I'm still there. They haven't dragged me out of here yet. Being on city council, I think I'm an elected volunteer. I mean, I am technically. We don't get paid. People don't know that. And I feel like I'm a customer service agent for the city.
I love that.
People contact me, and then I can get them an answer, maybe the same answer they got when they called the city. But I can try and make sure that they're being heard and see if there's a way to help. And the good news is the staff at the Roseburg at City Hall over there they're great. We have a great staff, and they really want to help people. So when I say, hey, can you give somebody a call, or this person called to complain, the response is usually very prompt. The customer service is very, very good. It's just that sometimes there's a lot of things coming at all those people at the same time. And so the response may not be as spot on. The other part of it is no one likes the speed of government. Government doesn't move fast enough for anyone. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the things I've learned. But I really like being a city councilor because I really like knowing what's going on. I like taking the call from the angry person and responding to it, which shocks them. And then I don't like having to be part of big controversies that happen, and we get them once in a while, but I wouldn't trade my city council time at all. I would do it again, and I'm just happy to be part of it and appreciate the people that are on council with me and the staff.
Well, thank you for your service on that, man.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
You mentioned when, after like the UCC happened, you got involved with like different organizations, right? One thing you kind of mentioned when we were emailing back and forth, you got involved with a program, ALF, which I haven't.
It's not alien life form.
No. So I was hoping.
Yeah, really. No kidding. Take it to the next level.
Right.
Now you're 1 degree from ALF. How about that?
Yeah,
ALFO, American Leadership Forum of Oregon.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
American Leadership Forum. I think the connection, and I really hadn't made this connection before, from like after UCC and some of that stuff that happened to ALF would have been people like Vanessa Becker and Carol Whipple and Joyce Axie, and maybe Norm Smith, because I was around some, I would say, pretty important people that surrounded the table to manage the Umpqua Community College Strong Fund. And some of those people had a connection to this organization called ALF, American Leadership Forum. So the idea is for cohorts of Oregonians to be put together each year to spend a year together in the form of a week together for community building week. And then every month for 2 days in a different town, you meet with this cohort of about 20 people from rural, urban, all the lifestyles, all the, my group, class 34, 2017, we were class 34, was made up of probably 40% people of color, and probably 40% of that group were alternative lifestyles, either gay or trans. And I had never spent any time together with people of color or who were from the LGBTQIA plus category. So also I was the only rural, white, Christian, married Republican dude in the room at a time when Trump had just been elected, Charlottesville had just happened, Colin Kaepernick was all the rage. And here I'm sitting like the white conservative dude in the room with a bunch of not conservative white people. And I was scared out of my mind. But what happened was an incredible amount of grace was given to me by these people who, just like I wasn't judging them, they were not judging me. It's the second most unconditional love scenarios I've ever been in my life.
Wow.
So the first thing they do is they put you together with a person who's really not like you and you're their buddy. And my buddy is a gay black professor from the University of Oregon named Ed Madison, who I've become really good friends with. He's amazing. He's a media professor. Won a big award recently. Congratulations, Ed. And that person then is who you bunk with, you eat with, you hang out with, you process all this stuff that happens with this person. And we spent a week together with no cell phones, like learning some stuff. It was also the week of the big eclipse.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And we were at the Mill Casino for this. Normally you're up in the mountains, actually at Tokadi, but the fires moved us. Yeah. And I remember leaving the eclipse. We were on the dock there at the mill next to the yurt, walking away from that going, racism had just rocked my brain. Like I was trying to process if I was actually part of the problem and did I have a blind spot, and like some really heavy, big, there's a term for it called white fragility. And I used to laugh at that, but I understand what it means now. I was wrestling with like some huge things that were dawning on me. And one of the facilitators, an amazing man named Cliff Jones, I go, Cliff, dude, I am having like a crisis in my head. What do I do? And he goes, you need to cut yourself the same slack you're cutting everybody else right now. This is a journey. I hope it's a lifelong journey, but just, you don't have to solve all the problems today, because that's how I'm built. Just be cool, learn, you're going to be fine. And that was life-changing advice at a key moment that I have not. And what he didn't tell me is it will be like every day. It's not like there's going to be a period where you're going to learn some stuff and then you're over it and you're moving on. No, it's forever. So now forever, I think that way, that I'm on this journey of trying to understand the point of view of other people. So needless to say, yeah, it's been transformative for me. And I am a huge ambassador for that program, because where else are you ever going to get into a situation where you're going to be able to interact with people you would never otherwise have met? The number 2 person in Department of Human Services was in that group. The director of the Oregon Food Bank was in that group. We had somebody who had served with Kate Brown in the legislature, and not too far off of that, John Kitzhaber's like inner circle of people, incredible people who I became friends with, who welcomed me and trusted me and were so kind to me to let me go through that process with like grace and love. When you're in your most vulnerable and you get responded to that way, it changes you, because that's not what we're used to. So that's a little plug there for Alf. Yeah.
I mean, that sounds like a lot of people should be looking into that program, or even at like a younger age, something through like the high school. I mean, that sounds incredibly important. Yeah. Because a lot of those things are habits. A lot of those things are taught at an early age. Right. So I think, the earlier people understand the breakdown barriers, and, it's truly important to kind of learn. So, yeah, and that's awesome.
Yeah. Probably. And you've seen it in me as a city councilor over time. A lot of people think I'm just like, I drink the Kool-Aid now. I'm just like a woke liberal and whatever. And I just think of it as, I just care about people, man. I just care about people. What is so threatening about trying to learn what it's like to be a black person in Douglas County? Or have you actually thought about what it's like to come out to your parents? Do you know what that's like? And then it gets deeper than that too, because then it's like, okay, so what about your faith in Jesus and what the Bible says prevents you from loving somebody who might be gay or trans? So yeah, these are all things that are huge in my life all the time, that I'm really proud to wrestle with and think it makes me a better person. And I don't think I had to give up much to do that. Like, right. It's a key moment for me. I had 2 of my friends from the group who were black ladies from Portland, and we were having lunch at Bricks, and I was talking to her about our town, and they both said that they had been brought up to never stop in Roseburg as black women. When they had to go over to Coos Bay for our community building week, their families were very worried about them, because the last lynching in Oregon happened in a bridge over in Coos Bay, Coos County. We, of course, had the sundowner laws here very late into the 70s. that said you could not be a person of color and be on the streets of Roseburg past dark. And of course, there are other things that have happened in Roseburg athletic history that are alleged to support the claim that we are a whole bunch of white racist people that don't like black people from Portland. So, true or not, that's the perception. My opinion of racism did not matter when these two women looked at me and said, I have been raised never to set foot in this town. Forget it. What my opinion of that doesn't matter now, because they said that. And it's real, and they are afraid. It made me realize that a lot of people live in fear every day for things they can't control. And I've never lived a day of fear in my life. What do I have to be afraid of? So that really changed me, because now it's like, okay, I want to do anything I can do to break whatever the system, whatever the process is that creates fear for people who don't look like me, who should not have to walk down the street and be afraid. What can I do? So there's my motivation on city council. And there's some of the motivations, some of the things you see on Facebook that I do, because I think it's vitally important. And I'm really proud to stand up for that stuff. And if I take a barb for that, bring it.
Amazing. Highly respect that. Oh, boy, where do we go from that? That's like, man, that's
man.
Jeez. Well, what's for us dads that have daughters? Do you have any life advice?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Well, I ask Mark this a lot, because Mark has, my daughters are 13 and 17, 14 and 17. Yeah. And Mark's daughters are a little older, so I'm asking him stuff all the time. I'm asking. This is a question from me to both of you guys.
You are way in it right now.
Yeah,
right now. My girls are literally amazing, and from 13 to 16, I couldn't probably be in the room with them. I mean, really, it was hard.
Yeah,
it was so hard. And then they get their driver's license and they disappear.
Yep.
Turn 16, gone. You won't see them. So any chance you get to spend time with them, you just have to take it. And then it's like, I had a dream one time. I woke up and I was like, wow. I told my wife, I had this dream that my dad, who was 60, came to me at 30 and said, dude, relax, chill, please, calm down. You don't have to be so intense. And I realized that wasn't my dad. That was me coming back to me, telling me, take it easy, man. So all the stuff, there are some things you need to stand up for. Like when your daughter has a boyfriend and she really wants to go over there, and I promise the parents are home, don't
listen.
Don't be the taxi out there again and again. Just make it a little more difficult for them to spend that time together. I just go back to like, enjoy it as much as you can and have the most fun you can think of, and try to relax, and then just soak up all the moments, because they're just so fast and they're gone. My girls are 27, 24, and 21 now. We've got 2 doctors and a teacher on the way between the 3 of them.
Wow.
Oldest one's married, incredible husband that she has. Our son-in-law actually lives in our house while she's still finishing up her DO degree at Comp Northwest in Lebanon. And miraculously, we all get along, which is so cool. I'm so blessed for that. So yeah, I just think try to create all the experiences that you can, have a really great time, chill out on some of the stuff that fries you, and also start really working on your relationship with your wife, because when those kids are gone, it's just the 2 of you, and things change and it's hard. So you got to really focus on those things. And that goes back to all the times when the kids trying to divide the parents over things. If that works, then one day you don't have your kids and you don't have your wife, and then you're by yourself. That's not a really great way to go through life. So there's my advice.
It's good advice.
That's great advice.
Yeah.
That's great advice. So we'll end on our 2 questions. We actually ask everyone this. Your favorite sandwich and your favorite movie.
Well, my favorite sandwich is the next day after Thanksgiving.
Oh, that's a great.
Yeah.
Good one.
Yeah.
Answer.
I put all the turkey, and then even though it's already bread, I put bread on top of the turkey. It's the moist maker.
Yeah, of course.
And then cranberry sauce on top of that with a big pile of like, the cheesy potatoes over there. And then if I can, more stuffing with more butter on the stuffing. with the stuffing on the turkey, on the bread, and your gut.
Okay.
That's my best sandwich.
It's coming up.
I dropped that sandwich one day at work, the next day after, and still ate it.
There's no shame.
Flipped it over.
No shame.
Like the insides were on the floor where I sit every day, shoes, the whole I ate it.
Got it. Yeah.
We don't judge.
Yeah, that's a good answer. That's a good answer.
Next month.
Yeah.
Coming up.
Yep.
All right. And then favorite movie.
Favorite movie? Oh, goodness.
I know that's a hard question for anyone.
I mean, I practically recite most of the interesting scenes in Tombstone in my head.
Oh
constantly.
my gosh, yes.
That was a great great movie. But at our house, we almost are always reciting like lines from 50 First Dates, The Sandlot, That Thing You Do, and then for me, Tombstone. But the kids don't go there. The other three, Field of Dreams. I mean, so good. But man, I mean, and then to see Val Kilmer in the new Maverick movie and know what he's gone through, and I just think of how iconic both he and Kurt Russell were in Tombstone. Mm-hmm. You're gonna skin the smoke wagons or just stand there and bleed.
Right.
You know,
You
I'm an
tell 'em
oak.
hell's coming and hell's coming.
Yeah. And now again, being older, I appreciate so much the last scene where he says, Wyatt, if you've ever been my friend, if you've ever cared one moment of your life for me, you will leave right now. You will just go leave right now. And he knows he's going to die. And he walks away, you know, and I just get that. Like, I totally understand that. Please do not be here in my very last, weakest moment. So yeah, Tombstone, man.
Classic.
I might have to watch it tonight. Thank you for reminding me of that. I have a city council meeting. Darn it. Wait a minute.
All right.
Well, shoot. Amazing. Thank you so much for your time. That was I got chills, I think, 3 times. So
right on.
Yeah, that was, so much out of that. Wow.
I love what you guys are doing. Don't stop. Just keep going. It's going to get, it's a lot of work. There's a ton of time. You have like 4 hours of material to edit now. It's a lot of work, but there's something really cool about what you're doing. And so just don't stop and keep finding people. Don't lose those notes over there, Mark, chase those threads down, and don't be afraid of, being too honest in some of this stuff. There's some stuff people don't want to really have brought up again if you're going to go deep into any of those mysteries that are going on there. But, you're journalists and you're historians right now, and there's value in what you're doing. So don't stop.
Well, that means a lot. Yeah. I mean, truly, that really does mean a lot.
Yeah. Someday you'll write a book.
Yeah. If you want to get a hold of our show, it's Oregon Files Podcast at yahoo.com. If you want to listen to it, Mark puts it out on YouTube. And again, you can find this anywhere you listen to your podcast. We have a link on our Instagram page that kind of takes you to all the various options to listen to the podcast. And again, so graciously, thank you, Brian. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Cheers.